Welcome to the Dropout Multimillionaire Podcast, hosted by best-selling author and serial entrepreneur Brian Will. Here we go.
Okay, good morning and welcome to today's episode of the Dropout Multimillionaire Podcast. This podcast is based on my second book of the same name. It was a Wall Street Journal best-selling book last year. I'm your host, Brian Will, and I'll be leading you down this journey of success and failure and hopefully learning from both. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking to Wyatt Foster. Now, I've known Wyatt for probably 25 years when he first got started with his business. Watched him build this company from the ground up, and then watched him sell it recently and sail off in the sunset, so to speak, and live his best life. So I've watched some of the good stuff. I've watched some of the bad stuff. There are some great stories coming today, and I think y'all will enjoy this. So with that, good morning, Wyatt, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Brian, and thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. I've been looking forward to this one because whenever we get together, we just start laughing and telling crazy stories about some of the crazy stuff that we've done and seen over the years. In fact, the genesis of this was you and your wife, Beverly, had invited me to come have lunch with you out at the lake, a week or so ago. And we sat there just laughing for an hour about all kinds of crazy stuff that we've been through. And I was like, this really needs to be in our podcast episode. So that's kind of how we got here. But
yeah, well, I had a great time last Friday, and I haven't laughed to where tears have come out of my eyes in a long time. So, it's cool to get together with folks like yourself that we both started off on a path early, and I've watched you and your family grow. And I was telling Beverly a couple of days ago prior to, getting together with you, it's like, gosh, I remember both our girls at the same ballet concert or something when they were, I forget how old they were. They must have been like 5 or 6 or something, maybe.
Just babies
Running into you, and talking to you. And you had another business venture you were into. You always, had something going on, which
always got something new.
Yeah, which was cool. So this will be fun. I got no idea what you're going to ask me, but let's
Well, why don't we start with your company? You've built a company, and talk a little bit about Sea Ventures. What was Sea Ventures all about?
Sure. Well, let me start at the beginning. I got certified to scuba dive in 1977, and it was funny how I got into that. I was, 21 years old. My little brother and my mother were taking a scuba class. And my brother called me up and said, man, you need to come do this. You ought to see all the women in this class. Now, this was before I was married. This is my disclaimer there.
Disclaimer.
I had no idea of scuba diving at all. And I said, sign me up. So he signed me up, and I was in class, and we got certified in 1977, started diving with one of the local shops here in town. And in 1979, my father was in construction, and he was looking to get out. And one of the other businesses, that dive centers that I was diving out of, actually pissed off my mother. And she goes, well, I'll just open up a dive shop. So my dad and I started in 1979, opened up Sandy Springs Divers in Sandy Springs, Georgia. So we were one of 4 dive centers at that time. And diving was relatively early in its early stages, respectively. I mean, this was back when Jacques Cousteau had Silent World on, which was the movie back then that we all watched, and Sea Hunt, another one that we watched. Now, this is going back a few years for some of your listeners, but
wait, I have to give you some trivia, Wyatt. When I was in Antarctica in February, I was there with Jacques Cousteau's grandson.
Wow,
and his wife. They're running a foundation, save the world, save the planet, save the krill, that whole thing. So they were with us on the trip, shooting videos and stuff for their foundations. That was pretty cool.
Very cool. One of the things that, and please cut me when I start telling too many stories, because I like to tell stories. But so much has happened over the years. So we got started in 79, opened up the store in the early 80s. I was in my early 20s. Another quick story, kind of similar to yours. When the Etosha was found off the coast of Florida and dry Tortugas, we had an instructor that worked for us, and there was a few investors there that lived here in town, and they flew Debbie Witcher, who was one of our instructors, down to certify their son on the Etosha in
Oh,
the early
wow.
80s. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Of course, Mel had that ship tied up and all that gold found, $400 million worth of gold.
Yeah.
And he died broke, how those things go
Isn't that
with,
crazy?
yeah, with those kinds of things. So, early on in the early 80s, I'm getting, kind of a little bit bit with the treasure hunting bug with that stuff going on. So I'm going, man, this is pretty cool. I can hang with you guys for a while on this, and running trips all over the world. And just had my biggest worry out there was what SPF was I going to use for the day. That was some of the executive decisions we had to make. But
Now, I remember when I met you, let's see, my wife at the time was babysitting for a couple, and that couple was going to get certified to go diving. And they brought her and me along to watch their children. And they were going to get certified down in Florida at some springs. What's it called? Crystal River or something like that.
Crystal River, yeah.
And they were learning from you and Beverly. Y'all were running this class down there. And I was the babysitter for some couple, me and my wife. And that's when I first met you. And I remember you saying, yeah, you really need to get into scuba diving. And I was like, oh, okay. I might try that. That could be kind of cool.
Yeah.
That's when I first met you. And I was like, yeah, how do I do this dive class thing? And then there we go. That's how our friendship started.
Yeah, that's wild. Now, what year was that? Do you remember? Do you remember what year that was?
Gosh, I was thinking about this yesterday. And for anybody who's a diver or an old time diver, I still have my black card, which is back when they did the Dive Masters cards were black.
Yeah.
Don't believe they do those anymore. That's a badge of honor.
Yeah.
And so I was 22 when I got my Dive Master card. And so it probably took me a year to get there. So let's say 21 and I'm 57. We're talking 36 years ago.
Yeah.
That was a long time.
Isn't that crazy?
And SeaVentures didn't really exist. As I recall, you didn't have a shop. You didn't have the bus. I was working with you. We were going out to people's swimming pools.
That's right.
And teaching diving in pools or wherever you could rent one. I remember there was a place in Marietta, and I can't remember what it's called, Indian Country Club or something. We put a big bubble over top of their pool in the winter so we could do classes in there.
Yeah.
I got to remember the first time I was like helping you do a class as a dive master candidate, and you're like, hey man, jump in the water. I'm like, you're crazy. That water's freezing.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, man, you got to get in the water. I'm staying out here where it's warm. I'm the instructor.
That's right. Yeah, this was part of your training.
It was part of my training. Like, dang, man, this is terrible.
Well, that became kind of a trait of mine, having fun with you guys. My wife went through the Dive Master program with me, and one of my other friends did. And down in Crystal River in the Springs, I made them get in the water too, but they didn't realize what was going on. Okay, time to get in. So they're both in the water, and they look up, looking at me. She goes, "What are you doing?" Because I'm manning the boat.
I'm staying. Somebody's got to make sure the boat doesn't get away.
I'm the manatee spotter. I'm going to point out, where the manatee are for you guys to go. So I've got a pretty important role here as I'm wrapped up in my nice long coat while you guys are in the water there. But yeah, it's, oh my gosh, so many good times there. But yeah, I was with my dad from, I guess, 79 to 89, met my wife in 1986 on a Blackbeard's cruise. This was a sailboat out of Miami at the time. And we've been chartering that 65-foot sloop now every year since 1985, I think, is when we first started chartering that. Met on the sailboat, and kind of as the rest is history, as they say. And she worked her way on up through dive mastering as well. And in 1988, I guess I got tired of retail, swore I'd never get back in it again. So never say never comes to mind whenever I.
Yep, famous last words.
Yeah. And I just got tired of retail and started in it for almost 10 years and kind of went out and started managing some other stores in the area here. Beverly had just started working at a nightclub called Rupert's, and she was part of a orchestra there. And she was doing that by night and kind of managing properties by day. And I was managing dive stores from, I guess, 88, 89, 90. And then we opened up Sea Ventures in 1990. So in the beginning, people look at me now and they go, wow, it looks easy. Well, It does now, but it was not easy in the beginning. Let me tell you, it's, anybody getting into running their own company, building their own company, you better be ready to pull your bootstraps up and get to work. and do whatever it takes. My daughter is managing the store now that we've sold. And she was brought up that way. And she does that. You do, how's this going to get done? Whatever it takes to get it done, you got to get it done.
What do you think your biggest challenge was when you first got started?
Well, when we first got started, as you just pointed out, was water. We didn't have water at the first facility. So we're always looking for those pools. And yeah, that pool that we were teaching in, we had to turn a propane gas heater on to clear the fog out of the air. Remember that?
Yes.
In the wintertime, you couldn't see from one end of the pool to the other. So there was a lot of prep work that went into that. Again, the biggest challenge there was finding water. You got to have water to teach scuba in, and we didn't have our own pool at that time.
I remember your shop was actually, for your retail shop, was set up in the basement of your house.
That's right. So we first started in 1990. We incorporated, SeaVentures became a company. We set up a little store area in the basement. I had a pool out back. We turned one of the bedrooms into a classroom. This goes back, and you'll hear me say this probably a few times. You do whatever it takes. You take a few steps forward and you go, okay, evaluate, how can I make this work? And you just keep doing that. And you keep doing that every year, every step, and
You're like me, Wyatt. We didn't start out with money.
no.
We didn't get to rent a building. We just was like, okay, this is what I want to do. Now, how the hell do I do it?
Yeah.
And I'm sure your neighbors love the fact that you're running a dive shop out of your house.
Well, so fast forward to 1995 is when we moved out. And that's when I came home, because at that time, from 90 to 95, I had landed 16 health clubs. Sports Life was the major health club here.
I remember them.
And they had pools. So there was my water to teach. So I had a Ford Explorer that I had to load up 10 sets of equipment with scuba tanks. And I drove all over town. Monday and Wednesday nights, we had weeknight classes. And Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we had weekend classes. And that's what I did for 5 years. I was a mobile scuba trainer going to all the different health clubs while Beverly was working at Rupert's Orchestra, playing in a band at night. So we kind of swapped off. She would work at night and I would be managing stores in the day. We hire a babysitter in for me to go teach these classes. I mean,
Why did you go through all that? Why not just get a job and go make an easy money? Why would you go through all that? I mean, that's a lot.
I never made a good employee.
I always used to call myself unemployable because
I never was. I had, I started work when I was 13 years old, I just never made a good employee. But, at this point in time, you have a burning desire, and I don't know where that comes from, but we talked about this last Friday. I couldn't help but do what I ended up doing. It just, one thing led to another, and you just figure it out as you go along. If you want it bad enough, and I raised my kids, whatever you want to do, if you want it bad enough and you're passionate about it and you love it, then all it takes is hard work, because anybody can do whatever they really want to do.
If you and I can do it, anybody can do it.
Oh my gosh, I didn't have any education. I mean, talk about being a bad employee. I was a bad student. I visited high school.
I got kicked out of high school for failing. So, we're right there together, my friend.
Oh gosh, tried college for a little bit, and I made the mistake of going to Valdosta State in 76 timeframe. And the mistake I made had just turned co-ed. It was an all-girls school.
Huh.
That's part of the reason what attracted me to the location. That, and it was 4 hours from Daytona Beach. So I spent every weekend in Daytona while I was at college. So that didn't work out real well either. So I was always kind of drawn to the water anyway. About a year and a half of college, I said, this just.
You made it farther than me. I made 2 semesters before I dropped out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
So, I got hooked in with, my brother saying, you need to jump in this class, and did. So one thing just led to another. And so from 95, we opened up our first dive center. We had all these health clubs that we're teaching at. I was trying to beg, borrow, and steal, pools wherever I could to try to teach scuba. And that was at that country club. You and I were at the country club in Marietta.
Wait. I have to ask this question.
Yeah.
How did you fund this operation?
Good question. I didn't have a dime,
Yeah.
and working two jobs, raising two small children to get this thing off the ground.
Yeah.
I couldn't have piled more on my plate than that right there. But again, so we were looking at SBA loans and stuff like that, and all the government jumps you had to make through that. So we did something that I don't necessarily recommend doing, but we maxed out all of our credit cards. We
Yep.
took all of our credit cards to the tune of about $300,000. We put
Holy
on,
crap.
yeah,
3 on credit cards.
on credit cards.
I'm sure it was super low interest rate too.
Oh no, you're talking 18%. I mean, so really, really sticking your neck out. And I've been living on the edge and sticking my neck out all my life. I figure, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
And maybe
Yeah.
that's my stupidity, but you got to take some risks every once in a while. If it's what you want to do, you just got to go for it. And as long as it's not life threatening, I got another shot at it. If it doesn't work, I do something else or something, so.
It's funny because my last episode I shot was with a lawyer who's a friend of mine. And when he started his law practice, he did the exact same thing. He ran up all his credit cards trying to get his law practice off the ground, to the point that he said one day he was like, okay, if I don't get a case, I don't know what I'm going to do because I got no more credit cards. And he won his first case and he made some money, and then his law practice took off. And today he's got a big law practice. So it's not even just guys like me and you with no education who never had anything. This is a guy with a law degree, right? He's working for a big law firm downtown. Everybody would know here in Atlanta. Goes out on his own and still has to rack those credit cards up. So you do what it takes, man.
You do what it takes. And, the book that you wrote, about having no clue and all of that stuff. I mean, we really had no clue. We had nowhere where this was leading us. I had a vision back when I was working with my dad. I had always wanted to build what's called a wet store with a
Okay.
pool on site. And I know water is the hardest part of trying to teach scuba. You got to have it. So my dream was always to have a store with a pool inside. So, but again, I had no idea. I had no roadmap how to get there. I kind of was just relying on myself, my wife, and going for it. So, yeah, $300,000 on credit cards was a big leap of faith.
That's
What's the
unbelievable.
worst that can happen? I'd lose it all. But, one thing I have learned, money comes and goes. I've lost a lot of money. I've made a lot of money. And in the big scheme of things, like I've raised my two children with two little girls. They're big girls now, but they'll always be little girls, I think.
Always. Yes. That's a dad. So did you ever think of quitting?
Oh gosh, yeah. I have for moments of insanity, but it never lasted long. In the beginning, I didn't think of quitting. As it got rolling later on, when I started having to manage people, that was a whole different ball game. So, but I found solutions for that as well. So, in the beginning, no, I didn't think about quitting in the beginning. It wasn't an option. I didn't have anything else.
Yep. That's exactly right.
It was what, I'd already spent 10 years from 79 to 89 in the business. 1990 to 95, we're in the basement of my house, and all the manufacturer reps that I used to buy from at my dad's place, I would call them and say, hey, I got my own thing going. I want to carry your line. And it was funny because, they pull in my driveway and they get out of the car and I said, Wyatt, I can't open you up in a house. I go, I know, I didn't figure you could, but at least come on in, let's have a cup of coffee. So I did that with a few of them. And actually, one of the reps did open me up, Myra's equipment. This was, like I said, in the early 90s, because he knew what I was about. And he walked
Right.
in downstairs at the house. He goes, man, this looks better than some of the dive shops I'd been in. I go,
Yeah.
well, that's why I wanted you to come by and see what I was doing. So, yeah, we figured it out. Beverly and I working two jobs, raising two girls, and, kind of taking turns. She would work at night. I'd be at home at night and I'd watch the kids. And then she'd be at home during the daytime and I'd be managing stores. Managed a big store here in Atlanta in the early 90s. A guy called me, the owner called me, and we had met down in Bonaire on a dive trip. And he said, my manager just left. I need a manager. I go, well, I got my own thing going. And he goes, yeah, but I know that you'll do the right thing here. And I go, all right, I'll manage until you find another manager. Well, that lasted for almost 5 years until finally was ready to open up my own facility. And that's kind of where we were a moment ago. I was talking to my wife about we need a compressor because I'm having to haul tanks around all over town trying to get air fills also. I mean, busting my butt,
Yep.
finding pools, humping gear around, getting air fills.
Doing what nobody else was willing to do, which is why you ended up with the premier dive shop in North Fulton.
Absolutely.
Nobody else was willing to do that.
No. And at the time, I didn't realize that I was the only one doing this. I mean, it's what I had to do.
Right.
I had to keep it going. It's something that I controlled, something that, that we just slowly built. So from 90 to 95, I told Beverly, I said, we need an air compressor. She goes, that's it. I want my house back. We need to open up. Want to open up. So at that point, we were doing $500,000 in my house, which was pretty good for a small business there, and just the two of us. And all the monies that we would make, we had the other two jobs, we would just put back into the business. We just keep, paying off the credit cards. One of the things that I'll mention that I utilized throughout this whole process is you got to write stuff down. I wrote everything down. Whatever, we had a spreadsheet. We had a plan on paying off all the credit cards.
Yep.
In a certain number of years, and we did. One thing that I learned is if you don't write down your goals, you can't just think about it.
Writing down goals is magic.
It sounds ridiculous in a sense that when I tell folks some of that, it's like, why can't you just, say you're going to do this? And it's not real then. If you write it down and look at it and keep reminding yourself, especially when things are kind of maybe getting a little bit down, you're thinking, oh man, how's this going to work? Is this ever going to work? You pull out that piece of paper again and start small. Don't come up with 3 pages of goals. That's too much to take in at one time.
Yeah. I got to tell you, that is, in my opinion, the magic formula to success is writing things down. I know personally, I write down my goals. I have goals written down for this year, next year, 5 years from now. My goals encompass every area of my life, from money to personal to travel to fitness to how much I weigh. I mean, literally everything I do is written down, right down to even, I try to get out and exercise a lot. I literally have to write down every day of the month and the exercises I'm going to do that day to keep myself on track and accountable. And I will tell you this, every goal I've written down in the last 30 years, probably accomplished 90% plus of them, just because it gives you clarity of the end of the road, right? How am I going to get there? I write the goals down and then I start just chopping and chopping and chopping until, those goals are accomplished. So that is magic. It's magic. I'm telling you.
It is. And I never would have thought that myself until I just started doing it. I don't know what caused me to. I just started to write stuff down, but I found it wasn't real. I also found that once I did that, it freed up more space in my head because I had so much going on in my head. I get, kind of laughed at sometimes. I'd keep a notepad by the bed through the early years because I'd wake up at 3:00 in the morning all the time with my head just overflowing with ideas, and I couldn't go back to sleep again until I wrote it down.
Yep.
I don't know why 3:00 is the witching hour for ideas. It's a bad time of the day to, for me, for the well to be turned on there, but it just happened. So.
But wait a minute. What about when you wake up at 9:00 in the morning, look at your notepad, and it's like, what the hell did I write down here? I don't even know what that says.
Oh, yeah. So I ended up, write everything down. And even if you don't think that you're going to, get back to it again, at least you can kind of say, okay, here's, help keep you on track. But yeah, to your point, I would have to say the same thing, that just about all the goals that I wrote down, I was able to achieve. Okay, I kept it small to begin with. And in the beginning, it's like, God, I'm working on my business all the time and working in my business. And working in my business has taken me away from working on my business. How do I grow this to the next step? I've got $300,000 in credit card debt. I'm getting ready to build an 8,000 square foot facility, going from 1,400 square feet to 8,000.
Big overhead.
I quadrupled my overhead and my expenses. I can't do all of this and keep the money flowing in. I need to be working on my business. So my wife and I, Beverly's always been the girl and the lady in the background, but let me tell you, she, we are polar opposites, but what a team that made for building a company, because her strengths and weaknesses are not mine and vice versa. So she was always in the background with with the ideas, designing and stuff like that. And I was always the big picture guy down the road. Here's what we want to do. I might, like yourself, Brian, next year, what do we want to have accomplished? 3 years, 5 years? What does 10 years look like? And as we started growing with the facility, 8,000 square feet during construction, I had all of my other competitors come by and stand in a construction site looking at me like, are you out of your mind? Because no one had ever built a facility like that in 1995.
Right.
I was the first one to drop a pool in a office space in a shopping center.
In a shopping center, which
In a
was what was so crazy.
I was the first. Now you see swimming pools and shopping centers teaching swim classes all over the nation. It wasn't done until we did it in 95. So we kind of started that idea,
Led the way.
but I needed water. I said, when I set this thing up, I'm going to take care of the water. I'm going to make everything easy. I'm going to put the gear right next to the pool. No more humping gear.
Yeah.
No more teaching in cold water pools. I kept the pool at 90 degrees.
Yep.
So this was 2000, 2001 timeframe. If I remember correctly, around that, there was a tech crash around that time, a tech bubble crash, 99, 2000, 2001 timeframe.
Yep. Yep.
So
in fact, let's see, I sold my first company in 97, got a big check. This is a funny story. Sorry to interrupt yours, but let me tell you this funny story. So this would be, you're right, 97, 98. So I sold this company at the end of 97. I get this big check and I go down to the bank and I told the banker, I said, I want to pay my house off. And he's like, you shouldn't do that. You should invest your money into the stock market. And I'm like, well, I don't think that's a good idea. I really want to pay my house off because I talk about this in the book. I had this McDonald's safety net theory that I had, that if I could be out of debt, no matter what happened, I could work at McDonald's and maintain my lifestyle. So I had to argue with this banker for like 20 minutes before he would take my money and pay my dang house off. So he pays my house off. And it's right at the end of 1997, which used up almost all the cash I got from this sale. It was like $1 million sale. So you pay taxes, you pay your house off, and there's nothing left. And then in March of 98, the stock market crashed and it went down huge. And if I had invested my money in the stock market, all that money I got would have been gone.
Yeah.
So that's an important lesson I teach people all the time is don't risk your future. It's just, you got to secure the future. That's important. Anyway, sorry, interrupted your story.
No, that's all right. That's good stuff. So here's another struggle. There's been some markers in my life in business to where, they really threw me for a loop. And coming into just building a brand new facility, coming off of that crash, that January of 2001, we had our worst month ever in the business. We did like $7,000 in January. Brand new facility, just doubled, quadrupled all the expenses, hired 2 more employees. We had 5 employees at the time, 3 at the other location, 1,400 square feet. And then they came over with us. And repair tech, his name was Alan Shannon, and he was, been with me. He was with me for a long time. So we get cranking right along. We opened up, I believe it was March of 2001. So during the build out phase, it took about 6 months to build out. So over that winter and Christmas and all that stuff in January, having a terrible month coming off of that, February, March, we opened up 8,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And we move in. Beautiful place. I'm going, finally, it's going to be easy from here on out. Well, that was March, April, May, June, September 11 comes.
Yeah.
Now, Beverly and I are out of the country when September 11th happened. We were running a trip to Cocos Islands, diving with sharks, and it's called the Island of the Sharks. So we went there to go diving with all these sharks, and we're having lunch on the boat that we chartered. The captain comes downstairs and says, there's been some planes ran into some buildings in New York, 20,000 people are dead. We looked up from the lunch table and go, you better check that transmission there. I think there's something is lost in the translation there from Spanish to English. That can't be right. Comes back down again. Yeah, planes It's confirmed planes. We're going, what? Planes crashing into the World Trade Center. What? So
Yeah.
we're out of
Yeah.
the country when all this is going on. Had no idea of the impact, the field. Now, I've got 2 small children at home with family taking care of them while we're gone and stuff. So we had no idea the impact of what that was or felt because we weren't here. We weren't here in the US.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once we got back, the 3 people that we had on staff, they were running the retail. I said, so what's going on? They said, absolutely nothing. The phones aren't ringing. Nobody's coming in the door. It's absolutely nothing. And I don't know if you remember, because I wasn't here, but there was literally absolutely nothing. There was nothing going on. People didn't go anywhere, didn't do anything.
Right. I agree. I remember.
No,
that was the day
nobody
I
was-
started my company. We started our company on 911.
Oh, so you know, I mean, it's like, so here I am, just opened in March, and September hits, September 11th. I'm going, oh man, you know, we made it through the tech crash, and now this, and I'm going, I went to my accountant and I said, what the heck did I just do? You know, because we've been working with him up until this point, making $500,000 in the house. Money's rolling in, 1,400 square feet. We got a great plan. We've got a design. We've got a
Paying
business
the cards
plan.
down. Everything's working.
Everything is not just working, but killing it.
And then life reaches out and slaps you.
Yep. I mean, pretty much it was. And for me, I got to put this in here too. My wife will testify to this. For me, the drive back then, it was so strong that I couldn't stop. It's not really about making more money. It was about what can I achieve next? How do I make this bigger? How do I make this better?
Yeah.
How do I become the best in my industry? So that's what was driving me. My accountant goes, no, you did everything right. It's just bad timing.
Yeah.
You know, bad timing. I go, oh, great. You know, story of my life, that with the stock market as well. But so October comes, nothing. November comes, nothing.
Bills are piling up.
Bills
are piling up. Yeah.
$300,000 in credit cards. Remember, I just loaded up. Built this facility. I'm standing in 8,000 square feet in debt like nobody's business. What are we going to do?
Personal guarantee on a lease that was probably hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars.
20-year lease we signed.
Yeah.
So December comes around and Beverly and I are looking at, you know, what do we do? What do we do? And we're going to have to lay, you know, we're going to have to lay everybody else. It's going to have to be me and Bev again in 8,000 square feet. But even that's not going to, you know.
And that ain't going to fix it.
No. So we just got busy. We just, you know, we hung in there. We were 1 month away from bankrupting.
Yeah.
Losing it all. So being on the brink of that and getting through that and just really putting your nose to the grindstone, man. I don't know how we pulled it off, but we just hung in there. Things just started getting a little bit better. You know, the saying, what doesn't kills you makes you stronger. Well, I've been through a few of those now. And
so I have to ask you this question because you, interestingly enough, have been through 2 catastrophic business events in your career. The first being 911 and the last one being friggin' COVID pandemic. You and I had many discussions when we both were shutting our companies down, and I'm laying off 150 people in one day. And you and I would talk and be like, holy crap, what are we going to do here? So did the lessons you learned back then make you stronger going through this pandemic? Did you be like, okay, I've been through this before. We can do this. I mean, did it help you having gone through it before when we went through the COVID thing?
It did. It absolutely did. And before COVID, I went through the 2008 housing bubble crash too. So
oh yeah,
went through 3 of those. So yeah, each time what it did was make me realize, you know what, no matter what gets thrown at me, I believe I'm going to make it work somehow.
This is also interesting. Let me throw this out there. So I have, and I'm a little different than you in that I've had probably, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 different companies over the years where you've mainly focused on SeaVentures.
Right.
And I've always been of the mindset, and this is neither right nor wrong, it's just me, So when I build a company and somebody come and offers me money for it, I take it. I immediately take the money and I move on. I build something else because I've always had this potentially irrational fear, having gone through some of these things in the past, that, this thing can come crashing down around you. It can fall off. The business cycles are real. They go up and they go down. So, I was a guy that built and sold, built and sold, built and sold to try to avoid that fear of, something happening and taking everything away from me, where you just stuck in there and kept pounding and pounding and pounding at the same business.
Yeah. And I got to say, with these struggles, how did I get through them? You got to have a good partner. My wife,
Yeah.
I probably would have, I don't know what I would have done. I mean, it helps to have a good partner in business when you're going through these kinds of things, because they are devastating at the time. COVID, even with the three other hurdles that I had with tech, 9/11, and then the housing bubble, COVID was the worst. I've never had to shut my doors,
Yeah.
to not take business. But yeah, to your point, you just pivot. You pivot and you make something work. You just keep going. You figure it out. And I've trained all my employees and my kids. There's always a way. There's always a solution. We just haven't
Always.
looked at it hard enough yet.
And I always say there's always an answer. Somebody can do anything. Somebody knows the answer. You just got to find the right person. In fact, as I recall, during the pandemic, you and Bev called me one day and said, "Holy crap, we can't get these EIDL loans through." And I said, "I got a guy."
Yep.
Hooked you up with that guy, and boom, you had it done.
Boom, we got it. Absolutely. So there's always a way. It sounds like, oh man, it's tough, running a company and keeping it going. And it is. But you know what? There's always a way to make things happen. You just got to put your nose down and get it done. But
let me ask you this, Wyatt. So we got about 15 minutes left here. So I want to ask you some questions that I think are always critical to these. So my first one is, you've had a long career. You've been, incredibly successful. You speak at conventions for the dive industry. In fact, we were just telling me that you're going to speak at a convention and you're talking about numbers, which is critically important in any business. I'm actually about to speak at a franchise convention about the same thing. But if you, knowing what you know today, if you could go back to young Wyatt and Beverly 35 years ago and say, "Look, listen, guys, I'm from the future," like Back to the Future, right?
right.
What would you tell yourself back then?
So a couple of things, and we've kind of touched on it already. I'm not the smartest one in the room, and I don't want to be the smartest one in the room.
Right.
Surround yourself. I wish I would have done that a little bit earlier. Maybe there's a little bit of ego. No, I don't need any help. I kind of was brought up that way. I don't need anybody. That's why I didn't have any money.
Right. Yep. Me too.
I didn't borrow any money. I didn't get any money from my parents. I don't need any help. I can do this on myself. But get people on board a little bit earlier is probably what I would have done. Utilize. I mean, I had help all around me with my clients. You being one of them, being in scuba diving, and just not, leaning on some of those people and asking for advice more. That would probably what I would say to do over again. Rely on that and ask my customers earlier in the process, what is it that you want? What can I do better? And really focus more on one of the big things that helped me through all of that stuff too, that I wished I'd have done earlier, was spend more time in kind of self-analyzing. In other words, okay, going through this issue or this problem or this struggle, getting through that, what could I have done better? Could I have prevented it?
We call this post-failure analysis, or even post-success analysis, right? Here's what happened. Here's what went wrong. How do we never have this happen again? If I have one superpower in life and in business, it's I have the ability to take a look at what just happened and went wrong and never do that again. And you'd be surprised how many small business people repeat the same dang mistakes over and over and over because they don't learn.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But that's
how many times in your career have you went, "No, dude, we already did that once. We're not doing that again."
Oh, every new employee that I hire goes,
Yes.
"Every do this and do that." And I will listen to them. I said, "Man, just hold that thought for 6 months, and then let's readdress it." And not only that, but in my training of the new employees, try to get them in that mode. Try to help them get in that mode as well, because I don't want to come off, you really screwed that deal up. you know.
Yeah.
No, the point of it is to look at your successes and then what you do right, but also how can you be better the next time around? And what that translates into for me is how do I better meet my customers' needs?
Yeah.
So you do that over 30 years,
Yeah.
you become in the top 1% in your industry at what you do.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight, but how can I continually, get better?
So you've sold your company now. What has it been? Maybe a year?
Yes, been a little over a year now.
And you guys did really well. You're off enjoying life. And I see you at the beach and I see you on the lake. You got a lake house now. So
Yeah.
was that the goal from day one to sell?
No, it wasn't. I was second generation dive store owner. We were going to pass it on to my daughter, who is now running it. Beverly and I took it to as far as it could go as a single store.
Yep.
And I had people over the years want to franchise me because the thing acted as a franchise at the end. All my systems are put in place, policies, procedures. I try to set my business up. And here's another thing that I probably wish I would have done earlier was set up my policies and procedures to the LCD, the lowest common denominator, so that
Oh, 100%.
anybody on my team can run it easily. So that what that does is allows me to transition from working in my business to working on my business. I didn't do that early enough. So there's a lot of things I could have, we could spend a whole podcast hour on just on that,
Yep.
those kinds of things. So, but with my daughter being involved, if we passed it on to my daughter, and I got to give her kudos for this and bless her heart, I love her to death, but we had somebody wanting to buy the business and she finally realized that dad and mom would never retire if I owned it because I would still always be in it.
Yes.
And I'm still kind of in it. I'm still having a hard time letting go of it because my daughter's still there,
Sure. Sure.
I want to counsel and advise her. She's 29 years old and she's filling some big shoes. I mean, we're the top facility in North America still to this day. Even through the pandemic, we were doing things nobody else was doing, and everybody was coming to us on Zoom and how you doing this and keeping business going and so on. So she said, look, let's just sell it. The company that we sold it to gives her an opportunity to do more and more growth, being a multi-chain store. I think they're up to 15 stores now, 12 or 15 stores in North America.
Yeah.
And so she did it, she did it for us primarily. So we were going to pass it down, but end up selling. And boy, talk about, learning some things there. We've never sold a business before. We've had actually 3 businesses in my lifetime. We had a retail business and then Land Adventures. We owned a Prevost motor coach that we'd run our Florida Keys trips down in. So we kind of sold all that stuff off. But one of the things that I learned about selling the business was have accurate P&Ls. First of all, you got to know the numbers. And that's what I was speaking at some of these
Yep.
seminars about. Most people don't know the numbers. If you don't know the numbers, get somebody who does know the numbers, sit down and go over with them. You got to know what those numbers are to find the holes in your business.
Are you quoting my book now, Wyatt? I think you're quoting me because I say that all the friggin' time. If you don't know your numbers and if you're not a numbers person and if you're like, I don't really, then get somebody who knows numbers and have them help you because your numbers they're a magic crystal ball. You look at the past, you see the trends and you can predict the future. It's so simple. I can't tell you how many business people don't have their freaking numbers. Drives me crazy.
You can't hit the target if you don't know how to hit it. So
exactly.
So I'm not a numbers guy. My wife is, fortunately. I was the questions guy. I would look at the numbers and go, well, why is this happening? Well, why did that happen? Well, what caused this? How did we do this that month and we're not doing it this month? And you dig in and you find out, as 7 months out of the year, the business does well and the other months they don't. And my job was to fill those holes. I want the business kicking on all 12 months.
You predict the future based on the past and then you adapt and you make it work.
Pretty much. And they, again, self-evaluating. What did I do wrong here? How can I do better? It's constantly that stuff, but it doesn't happen overnight. But
what's the biggest piece of advice you would give somebody that is sitting here right now? They get a profitable business. They want to sell it. What would you tell them?
First of all, know what your numbers are. The second thing that I would say that examine your company from the viewpoint of your potential buyer. How are they looking at buying your company? It's how to get in that mindset
Okay.
of what they
Playing
might
devil's
do.
advocate with yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. And that would help give you a little bit of perspective because everybody thinks that their baby, their company is all of this,
Yeah.
you know,
Yep. Yep.
it's this and now, man,
Prettiest thing in the world.
yep, nothing wrong where, it's all shiny
That's why children's beauty pageants are so popular. 'Cause everybody's baby's the prettiest.
that's right. So you want to kind of just look at it from a different perspective, and that'll help you in the negotiation part of that as well. That'll give you, so when they're throwing out this or that, you've already thought about this and that.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
called overcoming objections before they have it, because you already know the questions they're going to ask and you've already prepared the answers.
exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
We do this in sales, whether it's selling a product or a business. That's overcoming objections before they have it is the number one key to sales.
Yeah. And the last thing I would say, probably what I kind of learned from selling is I wish I'd kind of done a little bit better. I found these things out through the process was, get some folks in to help value your company. Talk to a business lawyer, somebody who's, sold some companies before. Talk to your accountant, go over those numbers with a fine tooth comb, and your financial advisor. Know exactly where your liabilities are, your assets are, what your profits are. Don't go into this not knowing everything. You have to know everything.
Everything. Absolutely. All right. So we're going to wrap this up. So here's the thing. I know you are like me. Your brain doesn't stop. You've sold, you're out there at the beach and the lake. I got to think that your brain is spinning 100 miles an hour thinking, what am I going to do next?
Yeah.
Got any plans? Got any plans? I know it's a curse and a blessing. I get it.
Well, actually, I was out on the lake, been out on the lake for the past 2 weeks, actually. We were headed to Florida this week.
That didn't work out.
We figured it wasn't a good time.
I was supposed to fly down there and I didn't go.
I hope you're doing okay down there. It's slammed down there on the west side. It's funny you say that. I got to look around.
Beverly's not around. You can talk.
Thinking about maybe starting another business.
That's what I was thinking. You just can't stop. Just like me, you can't stop. The brain doesn't work that way. I remember I sold the first company and I remember telling people I have no goals and I have no ambition for the first time in my life because I've been struggling for 20 years and I sold and I didn't have to work. And I'm thinking, this is awesome. And that lasted about 3 or 4 months. And then I was like, you can't just sit here. What am I going to, are you like me? Every time you walk in a store, you look around and go, I wonder if I could buy this. I could make this. This would work. I could do this.
It's funny because you're looking up right now and Beverly always catches me. She smacks me because I'm always looking up. I'm looking at the lighting. I'm looking at the merchandising.
Yes.
I'm looking at how they present things. What are they selling? I'm evaluating their salespeople.
Yeah, I know. We're at exactly the same.
I had to tell my guy who installed some riprap for me earlier. He goes, let me tell you something, man. You need some lessons on how to talk to customers.
We gotta jump off of this thing, Wyatt. Any last words for the audience today? And I so appreciate you coming in here and doing this with me.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking me. The biggest thing is you can do it. You can do anything you set your mind to. Never give up.
Ever.
If you get knocked down with challenges, it's temporary. It's not going to last forever. Get back up again, start the new day, figure it out. There's always an answer. Ask your friends.
And here's the thing. If you don't know the answer, find somebody who does.
Absolutely.
Because somebody has the answer.
Yep. Get your ego out of the way. And
exactly.
Ask somebody else. And maybe just enough of a snippet of information that will spark that idea again. You go, I got it.
Exactly.
And try a lot of things. Don't be afraid to experiment. I can't tell you how many times my wife has shut me down and my staff has shut me down saying, no more, we can't take anymore. I go, man, you throw 10 things at the wall and maybe one thing will stick. You got it. Just don't sell yourself short, and anybody can do it if you just put your mind to it. So,
Wyatt, I appreciate it. That's awesome. This was a fun episode. So with that, I'm going to wrap the show up today. I appreciate everybody listening. Hope everybody comes back for the next episode of the Dropout Multimillionaire. Again, I am your host, Brian Will. And remember, You have to be in the game to win the game.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Dropout Multimillionaire. To learn more about how we can help you with your business, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, visit www.brianwillmedia.com or The Dropout MM on Instagram.